Welcome back, everyone, to Embrace the Squiggle. Today, Ashley and I are going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. And we've both said it probably 1,000 times in our careers, which is the idea of let people do their jobs. And usually it's like let people do their own damn jobs. Um, and I know when we've thrown this topic out and we start talking about it, Ash, we usually are going down the face or down the kind of road of managers getting so entwined in what their employees are doing and being such micromanagers and so involved in it that their teams can't actually get their job done, right? That it is the managers and leaders that are getting in the way of the work getting done.
Yes.
And it makes me crazy.
Makes me absolutely insane, I agree. And it's n I say that from a position of having been a manager and a leader, and also as an employee and somebody reporting into a leader that has done that. And it's not just frustrating from a performance standpoint for an employee, but it also transpires to a feeling of lack of trust, and that employee starting to also feel inadequate. Do I not have the skills to do this? Do they not trust that I can get this done? And that's when you start to see those employees disconnect from the work and, lose steam. They're not putting in the same amount of effort because what's the point? You're going to go do it for them anyway.
Yes. Oh my goodness. The whole what's the whole point piece. Somebody I'm coaching right now, we were talking this past week, and again, we played the game of which it's not even a game, but it's the activity of show me your calendar and show me, right, how many hours free you have. And this is someone who's a quintessential middle manager, right? She has, I think, 9 people who report up through her. And then, right, she reports up through somebody who then reports up through somebody who reports up through somebody, right? Like she's definitely
That's a big company.
yeah, it's a big company and right is again like quintessential middle manager position. And she just gets brought into a gazillion meetings and does not have any time to actually do her work. And so we started looking at the calendar and she said, "Yeah, my boss always says that they're an includer." You know, we were talking about this from a strengths perspective. Their boss's number one strength is includer. So an includer wants to make sure everybody's included in. But this is always where I tell people, sometimes when your strengths have gone too far, this is what happens. So this person is an includer, their strengths have gone way too far. So instead of including people when it makes sense, they include everybody in everything. So as a
Yeah.
manager, this woman was literally in meetings. One week we counted that it was 37 hours out of her 40-hour work week. She was in meetings.
That's alarming.
How did like there's zero time for her to do any work. So
Yeah.
how can she actually get anything done that you want her to do when she's going in meetings? So we started looking at the meetings and I kept saying, which of these meetings do you actually have a chance to either give really good input or make a decision, right? Or are you just in there listening? And she said, when she started looking at it, she's like, "Oh, I feel like most of them." And then when we started going meeting by meeting, it was like 5 hours of meeting a week that she felt that she actually gave input or was making a decision. The rest of them, she was a fly on the wall,
That's a wow. Hmm. That's a significant difference.
right?
And it also for her leaders and managers, they're looking to her uh, as a manager to help drive the vision from an execution standpoint. How is it that she's supposed to be delegating and delivering those messages to her team if she only had 3, 4 free hours a week to be connecting with them, to be driving that vision? And so the phrase, it starts at the top, and we all say it, but very few leaders at the top actually make decisions and show action based on that. Um, but if I as a leader have a vision and I need for us to achieve these goals in the next, call it year, 3, 5, 10 years, right? For us to be able to achieve those goals, we need our managers to be delegating and delivering the messages around that for those people who are not sitting in these meetings. So if your entire calendar is consumed with sitting in a meeting and no time spent with your team, then the company as a whole overall isn't going to achieve those goals.
Not at all, not even close. And right, when I think about that, no time to do your job, it's like how do you possibly do a job when you're just in meetings all day? So I one of my
Yeah.
favorite it's one of my favorite activities to do with folks to really say to them, okay, and in the beginning when I have these conversations with leaders, they always think all the meetings are important. Right? When I look at usually I get people who are like, "Oh, I could probably not go to that one and I'd be okay." But most times people think their whole calendar of meetings is very important for them to be at. And
Yes.
when you have an includer as a boss who thinks everybody should be included all the time, I start going down that frame of, okay, how much do you actually get out of these meetings? And getting
Yes.
folks to just for even if it's a month, if it takes us a month to do this activity, to go to meetings and actually jot down on a calendar or a piece of paper or somewhere to say, okay, during that meeting, did you say anything? Was
Right.
there any information that was given that you couldn't have gotten in an email? Right, right? Were there any decisions being made that it was important that you were there? And
Yes.
then go back and see.
Yes, because I think what happens is just human nature says that we want to be included in things. It makes us
Yes.
feel good. So, us being invited or asked into a meeting makes us feel like our skills, our ideas, our opinions matter. And they're going to make decisions based off of what I have to say and what I can do. But we start to realize, based on even just what you were saying, that if if we're not speaking in the meeting, we're not contributing, then really we're not being included anyway. And now we're losing sight of the direction we should be going in. So I think our human nature to want to be included starts to get taken advantage of in this process.
Yes. I mean, I remember being kind of younger in my career and getting so excited to be invited to meetings. Right? Like
Yes.
going from the job where like you
I'm
had
so
no
important.
meetings, right? All of
Yeah.
a sudden like, ooh, they need me in the meeting. And it's like there's this tipping point where all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I'm in too many meetings and can't actually do anything. And from a workplace standpoint, COVID did some great things for folks, right? It gave people some more flexibility. It gave a lot of people that ability to maybe have a hybrid or work from home position that was better for their families. But I think one of the things, the disservice pieces it did was there was this kind of mentality from a lot of managers is if I don't see people, right? Or if I don't see them on Zoom, if I don't see them, if I don't know that they're doing the stuff, how do I know if they're working? So we
Mhm.
saw lots of teams add many, 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 many meetings. One team I was working with, when we first had that first 2 weeks of, we're going to flatten the curve, we were all going to go home for 2 weeks and it was all going to be good.
Yeah.
In those 2 weeks, right? Such a joke now. But I had a manager I was working with at the time who had a beginning and end of the day meeting every day. Every day had an 8 a.m. meeting and a 4:30 meeting for their team because they wanted to, quote, "make sure people were working." They were so worried people weren't working.
Yes. I had
And
the
I
same thing.
which is I just absolute ridiculousness.
Yes, and it got to the point where I started showing up in pajamas at 8 a.m.
Mhm.
because that wasn't even my normal start time, and I thought, "Well, this is ridiculous because we just spoke at the end of the day. What's changed between last night and this morning? Nothing."
Right. All you wanna do is make sure that I'm sitting at my desk.
Right.
Right, and as we all know, sitting at your desk doesn't actually mean you're doing work.
No.
One of my clients recently started a job and I always do a first week check-in, right? So the Friday of the first week, and then I always do a 30-day check-in when somebody gets a job. Because I'm like, let's make sure this actually feels like a good fit and that
Yeah.
you didn't make a bad decision or that you need some help. Sometimes people need help figuring out how to navigate that the first month or so. So this person, the first week was great. We were a month in, and at the first week they said, "Oh, I don't have a lot of work to do." I said, that's common in the beginning." Part of me was like, "Relish it because soon
Yeah.
you will be overwhelmed." Um, and 30-day mark, I have a call and they said, "Oh, you're right. Like now I have plenty of work to do." And they said, "I'm still not I'm definitely not overwhelmed, but I have a good amount of work to do." They said, "But what I realized was my coworkers who I thought were working really hard all day because everybody was clicking on their computer." She said she walked by their desk and it ends up that they were playing video games with each other. So these 2 people who she thought were, like, hardcore working all day long were actually playing some online video game together.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, right, and again, this person
No,
was so worried that they weren't getting enough work and was thinking like, "Oh gosh, like, I hope there's enough work for me to do here," and then realized, "No."
I hope they don't end up bored
I
long term.
Yeah. My guess is
Or they get
they
invited to the
right.
game.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny because I remember right back in the day when we first got computers on our desks and there was like a single game, I can't even remember, but it was like Tetris that was on the computer
Yeah.
automatically, and thinking, right, I would spend like 3 minutes a day playing it, and then I turn around and see my colleague who I shared an office with was playing it for like half of the day. I'm like, how do you have time to do this?"
I shared this story a little while ago, but it's also very relevant on this topic as in saying I wasn't a micromanager, but I was somebody who didn't want my team to experience or feel failure. I always wanted them to feel like they were the best they could be. And so when I saw something that um, could look like a failure, or, they took a wrong turn and they hit some bumps in the road, that I would go and kind of rescue it and jump in and save it, or I'll go handle this part of it. Instead of allowing them to experience the challenge or to experience the step back, because that's where we learn, is through
Mhm.
those challenges. And I didn't realize, and my coach at the time said that, this is where I jump on bombs. And that's where he would say, Ashley, you have to stop jumping on all the bombs. One, it was causing me burnout, and it was me adding more to my plate than necessary on my own. And also, I was taking away the ability for anyone on my team to learn their own lessons and to develop those skills through those challenges. And when he really highlighted that for me, I realized, I'm like, wow, I'm the problem. And I became very hyper aware of how I managed my team after that.
Mhm.
Uh, in more of I will give you some advice around some possibilities, but I want you to make the decision. And then whatever happens after that, however that transpires, then we'll figure it out together in the next phase. Because as much as I wanted to celebrate how much I adored my team and I wanted to raise them up, I wasn't actually giving them the ability to do that.
Yes. And I always tell folks, if we get back to that idea of micromanager, which I think this like let people do their jobs goes back to a lot of folks being a micromanager.
Yeah.
I've never talked to anybody who has been self-aware that they are a micromanager, right? Nobody ever
Oh,
thinks
no.
I'm a micromanager. They think I am making sure my team gets their work done. I'm helping them. I'm there to pitch in when they need help. I'm just checking to make sure where we're at. I had one manager say, "I always want to know everything that's going on, so when my boss asks me what's happening, I can say what it is." And
Yeah.
so nobody ever thinks they are. And never once have I ever been interviewing someone and said, "Hey Ashley, tell me about your leadership style," and had someone be like, "Me? I'm a micromanager." Right? No, nobody thinks that. So I used to always joke with folks and say, like, here are signs that you're a micromanager. Right. And I think one of them is the are you always rescuing your team? Are you the
Mhm.
person who's going out there and rescuing them when the slightest thing goes wrong? Right? Do you ask for regular updates? And I don't mean like regular, like, can I have a monthly report or, a quarterly report? I'm thinking I've worked for people where every single Friday I had to give them an update on everything I did that week. Are
Yep.
you someone who is spending more time in meetings with your team to find out what they're doing than they are actually getting to do the work.
Yeah.
You know,
Eh, I think when we all first start out as managers, and we start leading people for the first time, I think it's very easy to fall into that bucket,
mhm.
especially if we are not getting the right mentorship from our leader, encouraging us to have best practices. This goes back to something you and I harp on all the time, and that's when somebody that is good at their job doesn't mean it's going to make them a good manager. But so many times, people will promote the person who's good at their job and task oriented over the person who has leadership skills. So that's a
Mhm.
whole other soapbox. But I do think that it's so easy for us to fall into that bucket out of the gate because we want so badly to be a good manager and we're scared of losing sight or control over our environment.
Yes. I feel like new managers, it is really hard not to be a micromanager when you first get to be a new manager. Because you think, how do I make sure I'm doing a good job? Well, I make sure I'm doing a good job if I know what every single thing my people are doing.
Yeah.
And there's a balance there. Like, yes, as a leader and a manager, you need to know what your team is doing, right? You should be able to talk about at a high level what everyone on your team is working on. But it doesn't mean that you should be in the weeds and know. You shouldn't know exactly which step in the process Ashley is at any given moment in a day. You should know that Ashley is going to deliver on the project by next Friday. Right. Or
Yes.
is there a place that you can see it? One of the leaders that I worked with, one of the things that I helped them do, I actually brought in a different consultant to do that because this is not my bucket of strength, but I brought someone in to help them roll out Asana as a project management tool. So then here was a place that the folks on his team, he's someone who ran IT projects for a large company, and he never knew exactly where everything was in, where what step people were at. So what he did was then constantly bug his team about, "Hey, where are you at with this? Where are you at with that? What are you doing here? What's your next step?" And constantly doing that. So
Mhm.
instead, I brought in this other consultant who was fabulous, came in, helped them create about 10 different project types in Asana. And now all that manager had to do was click into Asana to see where people were at.
Yeah.
Right. And it
Yes.
it wasn't a burden. They weren't creating an Asana template that was like, the miniature steps. It was a good higher level, and it was a way for people to track it and for this manager to be able to know that at any given time they could get that information. Doesn't mean they needed to know it all.
Right. I also love tools like that. I've used monday.com quite a bit for the
Yep.
same thing. I love tools like that because I really do think it encourages empowerment for the team because if someone is out, which we are encouraging PTO, and
Yes.
someone on our team is out, but we know there's something that needs to get handled, if we have a tool like that, we see where they are in the project scope, right? Or what milestone they're on. We can pick it up from there.
Yes.
And it allows the team to be able to just function as a well-oiled machine without you as a leader having to be in, every little detail all of the time.
Yeah. So one question I get from new leaders often, and when I do my new leadership training, is, right, how often should I be meeting with people? And
This is a good one. I can't wait
right,
to hear.
I love it, right?
Yeah.
And I always say this, I hate to answer everything with it depends, but it depends 100%. And, Gallup has done the research and said, one meaningful conversation with every employee every week is what makes the biggest difference in engagement. And that starts to terrify people, particularly when they have bigger and bigger and bigger teams that they're managing. But as I remind them, a meaningful conversation is not a 1 hour sit down supervision meeting, right? Those are completely different. So if you can make sure you interact with every team member on your team every week, you're going to be good. And during that interaction that you're saying something positive to them, you're giving them quick feedback on something they did, uh, things along that line. But from an actual sit down, I usually encourage particularly new team leaders to say every other week. go on an every other week schedule that week 1, if you're thinking week 1, week 2, week 1, you have a team meeting. Everybody gets together, you meet together as a team, you have that conversation, whatever that needs to be. And that team
Right.
meeting, depending on what you do in your company and what it is, right? Maybe it's a half hour, maybe it's 45 minutes. Um, I tell people 50 minutes really should be the longest because you want to give people that chance to take a breath between meetings. But
Yes, water break.
right? And if you're doing that regularly, have kind of an agenda that people understand what the flow is going to be. Here are the things we're going to touch base on every other week. And I will steal this from my husband. But when Dave used to have meetings with folks, his line was, "What's up? Where you stuck?" And so every person had to go around and say what was up. So what was either something they were working on, something that was good, and then one thing that they could use other people's help with. Like where or and not even necessarily help, but like are there bottlenecks that you as the manager could help eliminate for that person? Right? What are the things that are getting in the way of them getting their job done? And sometimes where you're stuck was as simple as, I ordered Post-its and they haven't come in yet this week. And other times it might be something big that we have to look at a process or something. Um,
Yeah.
so I loved something like that. And then on the other week, the next week is where you have your one-on-one meetings. And I think of a time when I was managing a pretty decent sized team. I think we were probably about 8 or 9 people at that time. Some of the folks I had hour-long meetings with. They were people who were or we scheduled them for an hour, we'd break at 50 minutes, but these were folks who tended to be younger in their career, or maybe new to their job. And then the folks who had been there, right? I was managing somebody who had already been at the company for 25 years,
Okay.
right? They could do their job in their sleep. And
Yeah.
so we would schedule a half-hour meeting. And
Okay.
at one point, one of the folks that I'd only scheduled a half-hour meeting with said to me, actually said to somebody else, and then it got back to me. So we had the conversation. But they said, "I don't know that Colleen likes me because
Oh,
I only have half the time that other people have." And they took it
interesting.
right. And so they took
Yeah.
it as I don't think she likes me as a person and doesn't want to spend time with
Oh,
me. And so I had to pull her, like in one of our meetings, I said, "Hey," it actually got back to my boss who then came down and told me. And I said, "Listen, that's not the case at all. Right? I just always thought you didn't need much time with me because I couldn't do her job. There's no chance I
right.
could do her job. I didn't understand her job. I didn't if she was going to be out for the next, 3 months for something, I was not going to be the person to step in. So,
Yeah.
let's be clear, I was not going to help her in that way." And I said, I always thought of this much more as us touching base, and half the time it wasn't even work stuff. We'd be talking just like life stuff and be
Yeah.
done with it because she knew what she was doing. And she said, "Oh, I took it as like you didn't want to spend the time with me." So if you're going to
Oh,
have different amounts of time for people, make sure it's clear your why.
yes. Yes. I would say there were times where I would have an hour scheduled in the week for one-on-ones, but it would be split into two different 30 minutes, one near the
Mm-hmm.
beginning and one near the end. If for folks who had a lot on their plate, and, especially in human resources, you're dealing with some sticky situations, and it gave them time to work through it. Okay, here's how I did it, or here's and give us a touch base. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you didn't need the extra 30 minutes, but you had it there just in case. Um, and it- that's again more for that type of part of the company when you're dealing with people issues. But I I tried to respect people's time. And I think the other issue that I see happening a lot going back to death by meetings is that there's a lot as you start to kind of grow in your leadership career, there becomes less of a respect for your calendar
Mm-hmm.
where people will layer meetings in over meetings you have, and you find yourself having to tell a team member, oh, I have to go to this, critical, if you will, meeting that my leadership team said I have to be at. So now I have to tell you I can't come to our standing one-on-one, or I have to move it. And I struggled with that quite a bit as a manager because my team it was the reason that I was in the position I was in. Without them, we weren't able to do the things we were doing or accomplish those things. And so to tell them today you have to mean less because this is so much more important feels awful. One, you can't say that. You're trying to find ways to express that without getting yourself in trouble. And the frustration around why is somebody looking at my calendar and deciding for me what is important and what isn't? And now I'm in this predicament of having to decide which one I'm going to go to and who I'm going to upset.
Yeah, and that's tough because if you're the person who the boss constantly cancels meetings with, it doesn't feel great,
No,
right? It
it's
does
no.
it definitely starts to feel like, okay, like do they not want to meet with me or am I just not important or right all of those pieces. Um that's really hard. I think going back to the idea of right you're being in human resources where things are happening quickly, right?
Yeah.
And often I think of things like um so even just think of a job offer, right? The job offer coming through and how many pieces have to go into whether or not you offer that job, right? You have a manager
Yes.
who emails you back and says, "Ashley, we've chosen Patty to be our, new chief executive officer," right? And then you're like, "Okay, now we have to do the background check, sometimes a credit check. Now you have to check references. Now you're right that you have to do a comp review and decide where does this person fit in as quickly as humanly possible
Yeah.
because often, right, I had 2 clients in the last month who both had 2 job offers at the same time. And, often people are weighing job offers and you're thinking, "Well, we want them, so we're gonna try to put the best offer out there." So you're having to do these things really quickly. So I could
Yeah.
see in those places where having more time together might be really important. Um,
Yeah.
and thinking about as a manager, the other one that I suggest to folks when I'm coaching them, I have somebody right now who's a new manager, and not a new manager. She's managed one person for the past 2 years, and now she's going to manage a team of 8. So
Oh, wow. That's a big change, though.
it's a
Yeah.
big change. And the person she's been managing is someone who has done her job in the past. Like she's done that job in the past, and now these other 7 people that she's adding are not they're not jobs that she has done in the past, right? So
Okay.
she has to get to understand what they do as well as manage them. And we
Oh, yeah.
talked about the idea, which is one that I always love, particularly nowadays when folks are on Teams or Slack or Google Chat or right, whatever, however they're communicating, to say, you know what? Take maybe twice a week. So if you're meeting with people, think about like maybe your meetings with individuals are going to be always on Wednesday and Friday. So maybe Monday and Thursday, you just block an hour that says open time or right open questions or it's like when people say they have an open door policy, I'm like, please don't ever say that because no one does. No one has an open door policy. Right? Open door policy really means that you can just bop in my office at any time and ask me a question. That's not true. But
Right.
if you can block off your time, and depending on the role, maybe you need an hour every day that folks can then be like, okay, here's the time that Ashley's going to be on Teams or Zoom or whatever, Google Meet. And you just have that open. And if someone has a question, that's their time that day that they can pop in and ask it. So
Yeah.
then
That's a
you're
great
not
idea.
bombarded with 930 questions all day.
Yes, which has also been a struggle for the in office environment as well, because you'll find that, well, I find it to be more efficient because what is used to be a 30-minute Teams call is now a 5-minute chat in the hallway. Love that
Yeah.
it solves that. Um, that's been fantastic being in the office for that. However, to the reverse, so many people want to have those 5-minute hallway chats that I'm never back to my desk to actually do work. So So having that dedicated time is a great, I think that's a great compromise. And I want to have this time where you can come in and chat with me. And I want to have these discussions and in person and more personally from a connection standpoint. But also I have to get things done
Yeah.
too.
And it's great because a number of the like executives that I've had them put these on their calendars, and sometimes it depends on who you are, but often I find the higher up you are, right? If you're the Like I have somebody I'm coaching who's a COO, right? As a COO, you're not going to have 5 hours a week of this time. This COO has 1 hour a week that they've dropped on their calendar. That's like drop in, ask a question if you need it, right? The rest of the week, they manage everything through Teams and everything else, but they don't have 5 hours a week to put on there. And in the beginning, I had him do 2, and it was too much for him. So I'm like, okay, 1 hour, at least you're doing one. And what happens is if nobody shows up, you now have an hour of work time.
Yeah.
So you can actually get things done then. So I was like, these are great to just block on your calendar, just quick drop-in times uh, that people can ask. I think of the first person I did this with was because they had a staff member who was Teams messaging them 1 billion times a day.
Oh God. Oh, no.
Right? Everything this person did, they had to ask a question about. And when I say everything, I think of at one point I was asking her, and it was like we had our meeting at like 11 a.m. and I said, "How many messages have you gotten so far today from this person?" And it's only 11 a.m. and she had already had 20 messages from this person.
Oh,
That almost all of them started with just double checking. Or is this right? Is this okay? Like those types of things. So the staff person didn't have confidence in their ability.
yeah.
And so I was having to like coach this person to then
Coach
coach
them.
them, but to really say, listen, I will answer your questions during this time frame. Like feel free to send them, but I will not be answering them until then.
Yeah.
Um, and it took some time, but it did help the person gain that confidence and allow them to do their job. Like they themselves were getting in their way of doing their job. So,
I've never heard of a micro performer before.
yeah. Well,
Instead of a micromanager.
I do think, for young workers, I could see that happening for them, right? Where they're really,
Certainly.
worried about doing things right. But sometimes as a leader, you have to also instill that confidence in your team. And sometimes it's simply saying, Ashley, you always make the right decision there, right? I believe you can do this. Like in the future, you don't have to ask about this. You've done it right every time. And just
Yeah.
giving them that permission and building their confidence. Because
That's great
otherwise,
advice.
right, as you said, you're going to have a micro performer as opposed to a micromanager.
Yeah. You're grooming the micromanager as the micro performer.
Right? Because can you imagine if that person became a leader and no one had ever said to them, "You don't need to check everything"? Because what do
No,
they
that's the
think?
first thing that popped into my mind. I'm like, "Oh, no."
Right? Employees learn what they live. If this is how they lived as an employee, boy, I would not wanna work for them because, woof,
Yeah.
they would expect everybody to send them 37, chat messages throughout the day to double check that everything was right.
Oh my gosh. We neither one of us would thrive in that kind of an environment.
Oh,
And I don't think anybody should be forced to thrive in that kind of environment.
no, no. And I do think, I mean, it took some time, but over the course of the 6 months that I was coaching this leader, she was saying that over time, she started to see this employee gain more confidence, be able to do the work, actually be able to take on more work because they weren't sitting around all day waiting for someone to say, yes, yes, that's good. Yes, that's okay. So,
Yeah. Well, I think, on this topic, we have so many examples we could give and that we could share. But I also feel like, for any of our listeners that if you feel like you're in an environment like that and you're not really sure how to approach it the most constructive way, or you want some feedback on how to, you should reach out to myself or Colleen. We would be happy to give you some advice on how you can have a conversation with your manager, or even if you feel like maybe you're that manager and you need a little help, untangling yourself from the need to be a micromanager. We would love to help you and support you, because we're on this mission to create healthy cultures and healthy organizations and leaders who feel empowered and excited to be in that role. So,
yes, 100%. This has been such a great conversation, Ashley, and I am looking forward to our next one.